In the tranquil tapestry of life, a single thread unraveled, leading to a cascade of secrets, betrayals, and a dance of deceit that would change the course of one woman's world forever. My father, Alex, passed suddenly and unexpectedly when I was 18. I am now 26, and my mother, Emily, and I were both sad. We didn't get to say goodbye, and it tormented us for a very long time. My mother, a 53-year-old woman, and father met in elementary school in this small hamlet of just over 1,000 people. Mom always says she had a huge crush on my father but never got the chance to tell him. My mother's parents eventually relocated to the city, and she assumed they'd never see him again until her freshman year of high school, and she gets into class and sees my father, Tom, sitting in the same class. They swiftly resumed where they left off and fell in love. My parents were in their late 20s when they had me. They had married when they were 21 in a tiny personal ceremony on my grandfather's lakefront property. It was a small but beautiful wedding attended by their closest friends and relatives. After their wedding, they decided to buy a boat, fix it up, and sail around the world. It wasn't the whole planet, but it was spread throughout Asia. They spent roughly 3 years doing this while living at sea. Alex pursued his passion for photography, capturing stunning scenery and touching photographs of the individuals they encountered along the journey. He maintained doing so until his death. Emily sold the little handcrafted jewelry and art pieces. She used her artistic abilities and inventiveness to create unique goods that she could sell at markets, festivals, and online. This adaptable employment allowed her to work from any location, including the yacht, and complemented their adventurous lifestyle. Furthermore, Emily's expertise in art and design may have prompted her to periodically take on freelance work, such as painting murals or working on bespoke design projects, which provided a consistent source of money while allowing her to express her creativity and enthusiasm for art. They had the ideal relationship, and honestly, everything I could want in life. Emily and I had no regrets when Alex died, despite the fact that we did not get to say goodbye. There was never a day when we wondered if he loved us, and there was never a day when we felt he didn't realize how much we loved him. But after Alex died, there was a great void that felt like it lasted forever. I was terrified that Emily would never recover or discover something slightly similar to what she had with Alex ever again. That is not to suggest that I was eager for my mother to replace my father. That is not what I'm getting at. I just wanted my mother to be happy again and didn't want her to be alone. Then came Jack, a 56-year-old man. Emily met Jack 3 years after Alex passed away. It was a serendipitous encounter that neither of them had anticipated but both sorely needed at the time. Emily had been invited to display her jewelry and art at a local crafts fair by the seaside, which she had nearly turned down due to her lingering grief and reluctance to put herself out there. However, I and her friends actively supported her and pushed her outside of her comfort zone. Emily is the type of person who devotes her life to her passions and her art, and after Alex died, she continued to create those beautiful items. Her friends and I knew these needed to be shared with the world. I'll include a link to her webshop in the comments section. Jack attended the fair as a tourist rather than a vendor. He worked as a senior director for a corporation that required him to travel abroad every week for business, and if not regularly, it was monthly. Emily attempted to explain what he did to me, but it never made sense at the time. She liked to pretend she knew what he did, but he preferred to keep her in the dark or provide her with just enough knowledge to persuade her to stop asking questions or wondering. Their initial meeting was unremarkable in its simplicity, yet profound in its influence. Jack was captivated by a pair of intricately crafted earrings on Emily's table, which were ironically inspired by the earrings Alex had given her. He admired their skill and began a chat with her about her work. Emily, who was initially hesitant, eventually opened up about the motivation for her signs, many of which were motivated by her trips with Alex. Jack listened attentively, sincerely interested in her stories. He related his own experiences working on ships and traveling around the world, and they discovered a shared love of the sea and adventure. They chatted for hours, lost sight of time as the fair moved around them. Jack made a point of visiting local markets and fairs where Emily's art was on display in the coming weeks. He would swing by our booth, bring her coffee, and engage in lengthy chats about their previous trips and future ambitions. Jack was compassionate and understanding, which comforted Emily. He never attempted to overshadow the memories of Alex. He respected it and expressed genuine empathy for Emily's grief. I felt happy for her when he mentioned he was in town. I felt really thrilled for her and them. He was constantly present. We would go out to supper together. He would frequently visit Emily and cook her dinner, and she would go over to his apartment. But I recall her mentioning that there were no family photos of the house and no true personal touches, but none of us ever noticed because it resembled a bachelor pad, and he traveled frequently, so it made logical sense. He claimed he had never really had a home base and stated he didn't feel at home until he met Emily. Jack had always claimed that he had never married because he was too busy working. He explained that he had previously been engaged, but it did not work out since his girlfriend left him for another man. So he went on to say that following that, he truly put his heart and soul into his business and had difficulty trusting people. He explained that not having somebody in his life allowed him to travel as often as he did without feeling tied down or as if he was leaving anything behind. He told a sob story, and Emily and I ate it up. Emily would comment, "I don't know how a perfect guy like you has remained single for so long." Emily and Jack's bond gradually deepened. They had been together for almost 5 years, and then one day Jack took me out to lunch and asked for Emily's hand in marriage. Of course, I sobbed because I had told her that I wanted her to meet someone who made her happy and would treat her well for the rest of her life. I told him how delighted I was for them and how much I would love for him to be a part of our lives. Jack proposed to Emily during this lovely romantic beach date. She came home and told me, and we all cried. Emily was over the moon, and we began organizing the wedding. Jack seemed to be genuinely joyful as well, but then there were those excursions, those business trips that pulled him away so frequently that the engagement seemed to happen more often. Jack immediately began acting strangely. He started bailing on Emily a lot more frequently during his trips. He appeared completely uninterested in wedding plans. Emily, who used to be in continuous communication with me, but I now communicate with her more frequently, it simply disappeared and coasted for a week. He tried to explain to her that he was working on a major project that would take up a lot of his time while he was away. He was trying to land a client who required a significant amount of time. Of course, Emily forgave him and jumped right into wedding plans. It's not like she wanted a big wedding, it was going to be quite intimate, that was her way of doing things. However, it required much planning. Not only that, but Emily was attempting to persuade him to move into her home, but he would deflect the issue and add, "after the wedding." At first, Emily dismissed her concerns, trusting Jack's reasons about his hectic career. She reasoned that once they got married, things would calm down. However, the nagging concerns in the back of her mind intensified. Friends and family noticed Jack's growing absences and commented on how odd it was for engaged men to be so removed from wedding preparations. Emily, despite her efforts to be positive, couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She tried to talk to me about her concerns, and I honestly tried to dismiss them, telling her that this job was quite demanding and he had sort of mentioned that previously when they first started dating. He frequently talked about how stressful and unpredictable his work schedule might be, frequently working late into the night and flying on short notice. Jack had built a picture of his career as well organized, so his absences seemed plausible. He stated that he was committed to protecting his position and ensuring a solid future for the two of them. Then one day, while Jack was supposed to be abroad on business, he suffered a heart attack and was transported to the hospital. The nurses contacted her, they got her phone number and discovered that he was actually rather near to home. So she drove an hour and a half to the hospital, where they said he was. She dropped everything and dashed to the hospital, hoping to be the first one there to support him. However, when she arrived, she discovered a woman and 2 other adults already at his bedside. He had a wife and children, apparently. In a fog, he said, "Call my wife," so they opened his phone, and there was a red heart next to Emily's name. That was the first number she dialed, but Jack listed his true wife as an emergency contact, whom another nurse at the hospital had also phoned. So it was all one giant family reunion. You can anticipate that when Emily arrived, the other woman questioned who she was, and they both appeared surprised and disturbed to see each other. But Jack was out cold from pain medication, so we couldn't answer any of their queries right soon. There was some drama, of course. His genuine wife had phoned security to remove Emily from the room, and Emily and his tiny hidden wife got into a heated argument in the hospital hallways before the security guard forced them both to go and sort their belongings outside. And amazingly, this woman, Jen, had calmed down enough to hear what Emily was saying. Emily showed her years of text conversations and photos of the 3 of us together. He had bought her a ring, she had done some wedding planning. Emily informed her about this downtown apartment where he reportedly had this girlfriend, whom she would call Jen for her own privacy, and about his position as a senior director for a corporation. He basically worked for a consulting firm, which required him to travel internationally to supervise global teams. Jen and Jack had been married 28 years. They have 2 daughters, one was my age and one was 24. Jen stated that he was constantly working and was only home for 1 week out of the month. She stated that it had been like this for the past 6 years. That's when Jen revealed that the place that appeared to be Jack's residence was owned by a co-worker and was being used as an Airbnb, which made sense given the lack of personal touches in the apartment. So they stood outside the hospital, both suffering from the shock. Emily was in tears when she realized she had been living a beautifully built lie. Jack had a completely different family and life that he had kept hidden from her for nearly 5 years. The agony of Alex's death returned, exacerbated by the betrayal of a man she thought she could trust again. Despite the grief, she felt a strange kind of kinship with Jen. They were both victims of Jack's deception, and their common pain allowed them to connect. Jen didn't have to let her be there, but she did. They resolved to confront Jack together once he regained consciousness, demanding explanations and making sure he faced the repercussions of his actions. Jen had acknowledged that she suspected Jack had been hiding something for quite some time, but she couldn't figure out how to unlock his phone. While it was there, he guarded his phone with his life, as he can attest whenever he received a late-night call, spoke on the phone, or texted, he'd say he was working, and they trusted him because of his profession. He worked all around the world and claimed to have clients from all over the world. When you eventually awoke, the truth spilled forth. He had been living 2 lives for years, using his frequent travels to conceal his deception. He claimed he loved both women and couldn't bear to let them go. However, Jen filed for divorce shortly afterward, and obviously, Emily cut things off. I suppose they both discovered that he was speaking with women from other countries as well as at least 4 others. Jen forced him to contact these women, end things, and admit that he was cheating on them all and led a double life. Jen had also contacted his employer and informed them that he was using his work-related travels as a cover for living multiple lives, which quickly led to the loss of his job and reputation as a senior director at a company that values trust and integrity. His deception not only violated company policies but also harmed his professional reputation because some of the women he was seeing were major clients of the company. Emily and Jen remained in contact and have grown quite close. I'm encouraging my mother to get back out there, that the dating pool isn't scary and that everyone is like Jack. There are genuine, honest people looking for love and companionship. She deserves to find someone who will cherish her and show her the respect and love she deserves. I remind her of her strength and resilience throughout her life, particularly after losing Alex and experiencing heartbreak with Jack. She's proven that she can face life's challenges and emerge stronger. I am confident that she will find happiness again, this time with someone who truly deserves her. It's as if the universe said, let us throw in a second family just for fun. I guess Jack took work-life balance to a whole new level. Sure, his work kept him busy, but I don't think busy includes managing 2 separate households and keeping track of who's who in his contact list. And you have to give him credit for being creative in using his business trips to cover up clandestine family reunions. That is a mix of multitasking, but I suppose when you play with fire, you'll eventually get burned or, in Jack's case, hospitalized. At least Emily and Jen found support in their common falsehood. It's like a twisted sisterhood united by one man's epic failure at monogamy. As for Jack, I hope he enjoys his newfound freedom, since he'll have a lot of time on his hands now that his career and reputation have vanished quicker than his web of falsehoods can unravel. But seriously, who knew a midlife crisis could entail so much deception? I bet Jack's therapist is scheduling extra sessions to unpack the layers of his lies, and poor Jen, finding out her marriage was just a big side gig for Jack's international playboy lifestyle. At least she had the guts to kick him to the curb and expose his whole operation. As for your lovely mom, let's face it, after Jack, she deserves no less than a first-class ticket to happiness. I was caught off guard, but I appreciated her courage in dealing with the situation right away rather than prolonging it. I didn't know how to react. I was angry, yes. Was I puzzled? Yes. Did I plan to interfere? By no means. George, I'm not being unreasonable. Go to a lawyer if you think it's justified. All I ask is that you continue to pay for our children's college expenses. I only need clothes and jewelry, Linda stated. I sat in silence, clutching the untouched divorce application in my hands. Linda had already packed her things, and I didn't even pay attention to it, despite the lack of reaction on my part. She continued to chatter nervously, for attempts to seem collected were unsuccessful. Thoughtful as the words flowed in a continuous stream, I looked at the papers in front of me, and a small smile played on my lips. It seems that my amusement did not go unnoticed by her. She quickly sought in a piece, desperately trying to fill the void with conversation, standing up. I casually tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. Simply go away. I understand, I said, bidding her goodbye. I was grateful for the sudden silence as she hesitated while I went to the kitchen for a cold beer, without finishing her thought. My wife turned and left the front door, never to return. 10 minutes later, on the second bottle, I looked at the package she had left. Everything was as simple in need as she had promised. She also gave me a power of attorney to sell the house. We recently took out a second mortgage to pay for the college tuition of our 2 sons, Robert and Glenn. Selling the house at the moment would not even bring enough profit to cover the realtor's commissions. So, what is the reason that our 20-year marriage suddenly broke up? The answer lies in our first love, Cameron Bright. Linda and Cameron had been in a serious relationship for many years, even before I came into her life. Previously, she frequently referenced him in talks, and some of our common friends made passing remarks about it. I've never paid any attention to it. After all, he was only an ex-boyfriend, or so I thought. It's clear to me now that it was more than that. Lost in thought, I realized that the room was getting dimmer as the sun went down. Trying to turn on the lamp on the table, I accidentally knocked over 3 empty glasses. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Damn, what now? I muttered to myself. George, I just found out about what happened. Billy suggested that I come over to make sure you're okay. It turned out that it was Linda's sister, Grace. I've always been partial to Grace, even more than to Linda. I must have been drunk to even think about her that way, especially since Billy was my best friend. I mentally scolded myself for thinking such thoughts. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. Grace gently led me into the kitchen, although I resisted a little, feeling awkward because of her concern. I didn't need any help. The bright fluorescent light made it difficult for me to look, but I tried not to pay attention to it, squinting. I tried to remember how much beer I had consumed. I was halfway to my coffee when I realized Grace had stopped talking. "Are you feeling better now, George? Can we talk about what happened?" she asked. "Give me a minute." "I need to go to the restroom," I replied when I returned. Grace had already filled my cup, so Grace, tell me about my wife and Cameron. "When did all this start?" I asked. "Your son-in-law only found out about it this afternoon," she replied. "Be kind to yourself, George. It always seemed to me that she still has feelings for her ex, even after you got married." I nodded and shrugged in response. "A woman always remembers her first love," she said. "I thought she made a wise decision, but I didn't know that she only used you until he returned." I don't think she knew about his return. "So why is he back now?" "After 20 years of service in the Air Force, he retired with the rank of major. Linda mentioned that he has a generous pension and many promising opportunities for a second career in this field." She looked very proud when she shared this information with me, as if she herself was part of his military path. To be honest, George, her admiration appeared a little excessive to me. "I suppose she's living with him now." "He's currently renting an apartment in Baxter Heights while he is looking for a permanent home to buy in the area. Linda officially moved in with him about 3 weeks after his return. He called her right after he arrived in town," Grace explained. "So it appears that you were unaware of their relationship for an extended period of time." Grace continued. Grace tried to fill my coffee cup, but I motioned for her to stop. I declined the offer because at that moment I just wanted to take a shower and get a good night's sleep. "Thank you for visiting, Grace. Please lock the door when you leave," I said when I left the room. My sister-in-law had a worried expression on her face. I was glad that my children were not around, as it would be awkward to explain the situation to them. Although they would eventually find out the truth, I hoped to keep my composure until that moment. Although my career as head of the grocery department at a local supermarket was not particularly prestigious, I was proud of my job and found satisfaction in it. After 10 years of resisting the company's attempts to promote me to the position of manager due to the long hours and heavy responsibility, I finally changed my mind. The next morning, I called my district supervisor and informed him that I was ready for a promotion. By noon, I was appointed manager of a new store just 10 miles from home. After 3 days of studying in Baltimore, I started working in my spare time. I informed the children about my marital status, I put the house up for sale, and restructured my credit cards and banking accounts. The insurance was truly issued under my policy, but developing a new business took up a lot of my time, which I didn't mind because it kept me from focusing on personal issues. The company's work was well established, making it simple to overcome the challenges that surfaced over the first 2 weeks. The firm sent several experienced store owners to assist us, which was quite helpful. They took over the training of new retail staff, substantially simplifying the procedure. Half of the employees were experienced and had come from other local stores. I was certain that I could execute my job well. Everything gradually improved, and I had more time to handle my personal life. I decided to move into a tiny apartment near the store and begin getting rid of unneeded items in my home. I gave the majority of them to local groups, which eagerly accepted practically everything I was willing to part with. Naturally, the marriage bed was cleaned first. I found it satisfying to get rid of the wedding and family photos, although I did keep a few shots of the boys. Billy called and invited me to join him next Sunday to cook at their house. He promised me that Linda would not be present and wanted to tell me about Kim Lin, the local military hero. Right, there was nothing unique about it. Billy, the teenage daughter in Greece, appeared briefly before disappearing. It was an opportunity for Billy and me to catch up, and Grace offered us a nice drink and cleaned up after Billy while he was cooking. "So Billy, what do we have with Mr. Wright, or should I say Major?" I asked. Billy responded that Cameron and Linda have been hanging out there a lot lately. He has all talk and charm, the boys appear to have gotten into him, but he believes it's simply because he's new. Most of the males who come here are over 60 years old. "What is my dear wife doing while he is bragging?" I inquired. Linda generally stands next to him, smiling happily. She never behaved like that when we were out together. "George, you aren't a major war hero," Billy chuckled, but I didn't think it was humorous. In his car, he always wears a baseball cap with a major's insignia on the front, as well as a gold oak leaf-themed tag. He does his best to convey the appearance that he is in a prominent position, but something is awry, Billy commented. Grace delivered several bottles of new beer just as I was finishing mine. Billy saw Cameron had never graduated from high school, so how did he become an officer? The previous Mustang program was abandoned many years ago, and getting a commission now requires a degree. It's unclear how he was able to obtain a higher education when he couldn't even complete high school. It was a strange question with no obvious answer. Was he indeed a VFW member? I asked. Yes, he joined immediately after his return. Can you obtain a copy of his application for membership? Billy inquired. Of course, Grace questioned. I just want to clarify a few facts. I'll get it ready for you by next week, Grace assured. Grace immediately interrupted and requested that we change the subject so she could join the conversation. I'm not sure what we chatted about, but I left with a naughty grin. The following week passed slowly. We began divorce proceedings, and 3 possible purchasers expressed interest in the residence. The realtor was optimistic. Work continued as usual until Thursday, when I entered my office and noticed Maria Sanchez waiting for me. Maria was just promoted and moved to our store from a different location. She was regarded as a dedicated employee who deserved a raise. Losing her would present a dilemma that I was unprepared for. It turned out to be quite difficult to locate personnel that are willing to work this shift, and it is nearly impossible to find trustworthy ones. I hope you didn't come to register a complaint, Mrs. Sanchez, I remarked, and she smiled, though a hint of uneasiness lingered. Not really a complaint, Mr. Templeton. But I need help, she said. I nodded, urging her to proceed. I have 2 sons, ages 15 and 16, who worked part-time after school. Mrs. Sanchez mentioned that they struggle to catch the school bus at 7 a.m. My children are sometimes still asleep when I arrive home after 8 p.m. They aren't lazy, they're just exhausted. I need to motivate them in the morning, if you know what I mean. Do you think they should raise your wage so you don't have to work? I asked. Not at all, they are working to save money for education. They're doing well in school, but I need to push them. How may I help? She responded. What intrigued me was that she did not complain. She was a brilliant woman who was doing well but struggled with her own children. I smiled a little at the scenario and received a severe response. Mr. Templeton, this is no laughing matter. If you can't discover a solution, please help me. I will have no choice except to hunt for work elsewhere. Mrs. Sanchez stood up, rage in her eyes. For a time, I was concerned that I would lose her. Mrs. Sanchez, you are quite arrogant. Despite the fact that everyone thought you were intelligent and fair, it appears they were mistaken. I did not come here to be humiliated. Please be calm and sit down. I have a possible solution to an issue. She reluctantly sat down, evidently dissatisfied. I will reschedule your work shift such that they begin at 11 o'clock. This will allow you enough time to arrange the inventory for the night team, who will arrive at 12 o'clock. You will work until 6 o'clock when the leader of the day shift will arrive and take over the remainder of your shift. This will allow you to come home in time to get your sons ready for school and possibly prepare their breakfast. The only difficulty is that you must work at least 38 planned hours to maintain your health insurance, which you cannot afford to lose. I explained that while she was correct, I still had one more question. Do you attend church, Miss Sanchez? You are at it again. You certainly know how to make someone lose their cool, she said. I don't understand why going to church is relevant to my work, Mrs. Sanchez. You appear to be extremely volatile. Could you kindly try to relax until I finish talking and stop calling me Mrs. Sanchez, as I am not married? I responded, I'm sure you have a caustic response to it as well. She stated that I was beginning to be disappointed with this woman. I leaned back in my chair, accidentally leaning backwards while looking up at the ceiling. I couldn't help but note how cheap the fixtures appeared, and laughter filled the room as she peered over the edge of my desk. I stretched out awkwardly like a frog, and she stifled a chuckle while covering her hand. I felt uneasy due to my clumsiness, and she found it amusing. It took me a moment to realize what was going on and return to my starting position, but I kept going. If I can't call you Mrs. Sanchez, what should I call you? I asked. Is it just Maria? She responded with a yes, Maria. My two bosses, both Southern Baptists, refused to work on Sunday mornings, leaving me alone. I need you to start work at 6 a.m. until noon on Sunday. It will give you more hours, but that isn't the most important thing. It is significant to me. Don't you pay more for family health insurance? I inquired. Yes, at $80 per month, and both of my boys are insured, Maria said. I've decided to hire you. This implies that your boys will be automatically insured, and you will earn a small pay raise. Does this imply that I am not entitled to overtime? I asked. Yes, she responded after a brief pause. She was a really attractive woman. Her hair was a deep shade but not nearly black, and her eyes were dark. Her slim figure appeared to be free of excess weight, giving her an emaciated aspect. She finally spoke while I was staring at her, wondering what figure she was hiding beneath her business outfit. Okay, I agree to this position, but I have no prior experience working as a day supervisor. I've never had to interact with clients, she confessed. Do not worry, we will support you every step of the way. I'll work with you for the first 4 shifts. It's impossible to damage everything, I comforted her. I never expected this would be the start of our relationship. The original experience was really stressful, and I had no idea it would develop into something more. Maria was meant to remain for only 6 hours on Sunday morning, but we ended up working together until late at night. She worked hard to understand all of her tasks, and when we worked together, I realized how much I enjoyed her company. The Sunday newspaper carried a brief mention of a benefit at the local American Legion Club. Major Carmen Wright was photographed in military dress, smiling alongside my darling wife. After seeing her in this shot, I can honestly say she has never looked more proud. It's as if she earned the medals herself. I didn't return to Billy's until Monday evening. Grief called me at work and invited me to spaghetti, and I couldn't turn down such a good offer. Billy obtained a copy of Cameron's VFW application and dismissal forms, mentioning the photo in the Sun newspaper. He promised that he would get application paperwork from the American Legion at the beauty shop. Grace discovered that Cameron had applied to join the Liberty Keys Country Club. Linda and I have already attempted to join the club, but we were denied. If it didn't affect me, Linda was startled. Grace remarked that Cameron's statement appeared to have already been authorized the week past without incident. After work, I went straight to my modest apartment and relaxed with a few drinks, as basic cable TV was included in the rental payment. I was looking forward to connecting to the internet via ADSL in the coming week. The week finished on a pleasant note when Maria invited me to supper with her and her 2 sons. Even though I already had her contact information, she graciously offered it again. The circumstance was embarrassing and may perhaps be interpreted as a breach of the company's fraternization policy. I decided to phone my supervisor in Baltimore and explain the issue to him. After gaining his approval, I felt a lot better. I purchased a bottle of wine to take with me but had no idea what to bring to Maria's sons. Getting to know her boys made me nervous. However, after they learned that I had 2 sons in college, the evening became much more fun. Unfortunately, Maria seemed to avoid most of the talks, so I attempted to engage them multiple times. She moved slightly, urging me not to worry. She was happy. I got along well with Armand and Martin, and the evening passed too quickly, and we didn't have time to open the wine. On Sunday, I spent a few hours with Maria, who began her first shift as a supervisor. She appeared impatient for me to leave so she could manage everything on her own, which I regarded as a positive indication. She said she'd call me if she needed assistance and invited me to supper that evening. After supper, Armand and Martin vanished, leaving Maria and me alone. I helped her clear the dishes, and we were finally able to open a bottle of wine. The initial chat was slightly awkward, aside from Friday dinner. Maria and I only interacted on professional terms. When I told her that our connection could cause problems, she looked a bit discouraged, but she quickly convinced me that this was a little issue that I could easily overcome. Maria felt the need to clarify her marital status, despite the fact that I did not bring it up. She lived in Tucson with her children's father until he mysteriously left one day. Despite 3 years of waiting, he never arrived. Maria's brother, a bricklayer from Philadelphia, convinced her to go and live with his family. She eventually moved into her own house and began working hard to improve her sons' lives. Despite her experiences, she has never married. In the end, I told her about the challenges in my relationship. The bottle of wine was emptied, but despite the pointless chat, I enjoyed communicating with Maria. Our dinner was leisurely, lasting several hours, so the wine I drank did not pose an issue when it came time for me to return home. The next several days were rather peaceful, both at work and in my personal life. But one evening, Billy arrived with information from the American Legion Post. We had a few beers, each trying to figure out what to do next with all of this information. A couple of glasses of beer became a few too many, and Grace ended up having a conference with her husband. The next morning, I arrived late to work, but no one mentioned anything to the boss. I typically arrived early, so it was not a huge deal. However, Friday morning came with an unexpected twist. The company's 3 vice presidents unexpectedly descended on the store. They rapidly looked around the room, but it did not appear sincere. During lunch, they discovered that there were not enough managers in the grocery, which explains their visit. I was offered the role of regional supervisor, overseeing 6 stores within a 30-mile radius, with pay and benefits beyond my wildest fantasies. Naturally, I consented, passing the torch to my current store's second assistant, who was pleased with the surprise. I left him with a simple request to keep an eye on Maria, a wink in my smile proving that we reached an agreement. Maria was sad to see me go, but she was pleased with my advancement. I treated her to a fantastic meal to commemorate our first date. The kids were overjoyed that we had the chance to spend the evening together. It was the first time I had seen her dressed to the greatest standards, and she looked great. When I told her that despite my promotion, I would still work and live nearby, she was relieved but not happy when I announced the approaching 2-week training in Baltimore. I met Billy in Greece for Sunday lunch. We were pleased with my luck, and I tried not to drink. I was going to Maryland in the evening to get some rest before the first day of training. Billy questioned what my plans were for Cameron and Linda. After I replied that I would deal with this issue once I had settled into my new work, Maria and I spoke on the phone every day, sometimes twice. It brought back memories of my teenage years. She inquired about my academics, and I was interested in her life. I often asked about the boys, and she was grateful and became interested in them. My new employment entailed unanticipated duties, including the requirement to participate in public life. I had to join a variety of civic and social organizations, including the local country club. I was relieved to learn that my position in the company secured entrance into most places. Life was becoming better. On my first weekend home, I met Maria twice and kissed her for the first time. However, I felt embarrassed because I was still formally married. She asked me playfully about my hesitation to kiss and chuckled when she heard my response. She seemed to be teasing me, which made me happy. The company set up a tiny office in a nearby business complex, which was well furnished and included a secretary. They clearly have prior experience working in comparable environments. I was ready to start full-time work straight away. At my desk, among other items, there was an application for full membership in the Liberty Keys Country Club. My first priority for today was to sign the application and obtain my card. I entered the clubs for years with confidence, dressed in a new suit and driving my brand new corporate car. Everything appeared to be going well until I observed Linda standing with a group of women dressed in attractive tennis outfits. I was shocked because I had no idea she was playing tennis. The hurt and embarrassment of her previous deeds overpowered me, leading me to lose my confidence and swagger in an instant. I tried to pass by casually, but my strategy was foiled when one of the women said, "Isn't that your husband coming in?" I ignored the employee's remark and handed him my statement, waiting eagerly until he disappeared into the back room. I prepared for an uncomfortable meeting, knowing that it was unavoidable. I wanted to come up with a clever response, but my mind was blank. Suddenly, a voice cut the silence. "George, what are you doing here? This area is reserved exclusively for club members. You cannot just show up for an interview." I had a great desire to humiliate her in front of her new pals, but I lacked the strength to follow through. "Hello, Linda, you look fantastic. Is this outfit new?" "I didn't realize you played tennis," I started clumsily. I wanted to seem intelligent and charming, but instead, I stumbled in the middle of a word. My mind's chatter simply heightened my anxiety, making the situation even more uncomfortable. "You should not be here," Linda smiled as she replied. "This is a club for members only," making me feel dumb. When the employee offered me a membership card, a locker key, and a copy of the club's rules and regulations, I simply smiled. "Welcome to the Liberty Keys Country Club, sir," he remarked, and I nodded solemnly as I turned to leave. Linda gave me a perplexed expression. I simply said, "Greenland." I walked inside the lobby of the club. When I stepped out the door, I felt compelled to look around and see what she was doing, but I restrained myself. I headed back to the workplace with a smile on my face. In the evening, I invited Maria to supper at Red Lobster. I didn't want to brag, but I couldn't resist sharing the details of our encounter with Linda, which made me quite happy. We didn't drink wine because Maria needed to be at work by 11 p.m. We had a small laugh about the circumstance. Maria offered to meet me at the club for a late lunch on Sunday after a shift. I secretly fantasized about an accidental meeting with Cameron and Linda. The week went along without incident until Friday. Helen, my new secretary who was aware of my marital issues, greeted me with a smile as I entered the office. A local newspaper was on my desk with a photograph of Cameron being led in handcuffs and driven away in a black car. Cameron was caught attempting to falsely claim his veteran status at an American Legion post, unaware that candidates were being properly vetted. He actually retired from the Air Force as a technical sergeant, not a major. He donned medals that had never been given to him, which could lead to further problems. His actions were deemed stolen valor and were regarded extremely seriously. I had a feeling Cameron would receive a harsh reaction in his hometown. Helen gave me a cup of coffee and told me I could grin, which made me smile. An hour later, the realtor called to advise me that the house had sold. The purchase was planned to be completed within 2 weeks. It couldn't have gotten any better. Once I made my decision, the documentation for my final divorce arrived in the mail. Cameron, with the assistance of his new buddies, was able to accelerate this process. I was astonished they were still on friendly terms. Billy paid a visit to my new office as the day and week came to a close. Although the real reason for his visit was to inform him that Linda had moved in with him in Greece, Greece only informed him over the phone because he was not yet home. He wasn't thrilled with his new guest, but he was ecstatic with what had happened. Billy did not resist. We offered him to celebrate at the little bar on the corner, provided I paid the bill. I contacted Maria at home before she left for work and told her all of the great news. I believe she was as thrilled as I was. Billy roused me out of bed on Saturday morning. He tolerated booze better than I did. We headed to Sean for breakfast at the buffet and some much-needed coffee. During dinner, I learned new facts concerning the issue with my ex-wife Linda's automobile. It was confiscated. As it turned out, Cameron gave her worthless checks to pay for it. She had no idea about it until they came to pick up the car. He seems to have done everything else in the same misleading manner. Grace invited Linda to stay with her for a week, but she didn't know where to go or what to do next. The money she received after her marriage also inexplicably vanished. Cameron managed to deceive several people before being apprehended. Maria had already fallen asleep in bed, but Armand and Martin couldn't wait to get to the Liberty Keys golf course when we went home. Maria had already woken up and chastised us for having fun without her. We chose to buy pizza and watch a paid movie. Life was good. Maria and I went to the country club for a lovely lunch the next morning. I had hoped to impress Linda and Cameron by showing them Maria, but they never came up, despite a few stares and comments. Everything was going smoothly. It was the first of several future branches. Linda moved into a furnished apartment immediately after her departure. Billy and Grace's home. Despite being sisters, Grace and Linda's relationship was not as tight as it once was. 3 months later, Robert and Glenn returned home for a wedding and taunted me that I had found 2 new males to replace Maria. Much to my delight, all 4 guys greeted each other. Robert and Glenn never discussed Linda. It was not an intentional decision to avoid discussing her. She just never came up in conversation. I am not sure if they paid her a visit before she returned to college. Billy was my best man, although he was really more of a witness because it was a simple civil ceremony. Maria stopped working before the wedding. I ensured that Armand and Martin both leave their jobs so that they could concentrate on their education. None of them objected. Despite the fact that I did not profit from the sale of the old house, Maria and I went to Target 2 months after the wedding to conduct our Christmas shopping. I bumped into Linda. She was standing at the customer service counter dressed in a Target uniform, khakis, and a red shirt. She appeared to have dropped some weight since we last saw her. When she noticed we were staring in a specific way, she swiftly turned around and disappeared inside the office behind the desk. We didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. She has gone through a lot already. After leaving the store, Maria and I decided to go shopping somewhere else. Cameron Wright unexpectedly vanished after being caught and charged, and we have never heard from him again. Robert and Glenn arrived at their new house for Christmas, and the holiday surprise was Linda's unexpected visit. Maria invited her without notifying me, which created an awkward scenario. Despite my frustration, I quickly recognized Maria's action was both compassionate and courageous. The confrontation that ensued was required for all of us to find an exit. Although I have never totally forgiven Linda for her conduct, the fact that she conceded defeat helped to resolve the problem. In the next story, I'm Sarah, and my spouse, David, and I have known each other our entire lives. We grew up together, attended school together, and later fell in love. We were married 6 years ago and have always wanted to start a family together. David is 34 years old. He is an extremely talented coder who works from home and makes a fair salary. He comes from an affluent family, thus he does not need to work as much. In contrast, I'm 33 years old. I have a conventional 9-to-5 job in an office. It is not glamorous, but I have never wanted to be a stay-at-home parent. Furthermore, the employment allowed me time for my affair. We met as kids growing up in the same area. Our parents were friends, so we spent a lot of time together playing and exploring our surroundings. As we grew older, our friendship grew stronger, and it came as no surprise that we fell in love. David and I have always wanted to start a family. We didn't have any children yet, but we hope to change that over the next few years. We talked about it a lot, wondering what our children would be like, how we would raise them, and what experiences we would have as a family. Our childhood together was filled with countless memories. We were constantly getting into mischief, exploring the woods behind our houses, and fantasizing about the future. David was always the daring one, coming up with insane plans and dragging me along for the journey. I was more restrained, but I admired his sense of adventure in the way he pushed me beyond my comfort level. One of my first memories of David dates back to when we were approximately 5 years old. We were playing in the backyard, pretending to be pirates on an epic journey. David had uncovered an old map in his attic, and he was confident it led to buried gold. We spent hours digging in the soil, looking for treasure that never existed, but it didn't matter. We were having a great time together. As we grew older, our bond became even stronger. We went through all of childhood's ups and downs together and always supported each other. We were present for each other's first crushes, heartbreaks, and everything in between. Our friendship was the cornerstone of everything we would become, and I am always grateful for it. High school presented its own set of obstacles, which we faced together. David was always the clever one. He aced his examinations without really trying. I, on the other hand, had to work hard to get good scores, but David was always available to assist me, study, and inspire me to do my best. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I will be eternally grateful for that. During our high school years, our connection began to shift. We spent our awkward adolescent years together, helping each other through the ups and downs of high school, and when we finally admitted our emotions for each other, it was like everything fit into place. We began to see each other in a different way, and what had once been a tight friendship grew into something bigger. It was a scary and thrilling time for both of us, but we felt we were destined to be together. After high school, we went our separate ways for a while, pursuing our own hopes and goals. David went to college to study computer science, while I stayed behind to work and save for my own education. Despite the distance, we maintained in touch, spending hours on the phone and visiting one another whenever possible. Our love has been a continual source of strength and happiness in my life. David was my rock, always there to encourage me, make me laugh, and hug me when I sobbed. I cannot picture my life without him, and I am so glad for the life we have created together. I regret what I did, honestly. David will never forgive me. However, after we both graduated, we decided to take the next step in our relationship by moving in together. It was a significant decision, but we were confident it was the right one. We grew closer as we lived together and quickly fell into a comfortable pattern. David continued to work in the technology field, while I took a position in an office from 9 to 5. As the years passed, our love became stronger. We stood by each other through all of life's ups and downs, enjoying each other's accomplishments and comforting each other in times of need. David was my rock, always there to cheer me up when I was sad and make me laugh when I needed it the most. After several years of living together, David finally proposed, and of course, I said yes. We got married in a magnificent ceremony surrounded by our friends and family, and it was the most wonderful day of my life. I knew that no matter what problems lay ahead, as long as David was at my side, I could overcome them. Our journey together has been full of love, laughter, and unforgettable moments. David is my soulmate, greatest friend, and the love of my life. I cannot picture my life without him. 6 years into our marriage, everything seemed ideal. We were doing exceptionally well financially, we really loved each other, and made an effort to have frequent date evenings to keep the flame alive. Life couldn't have been any better until I messed everything up. That was the sole difficulty in our marriage, my discontent with David's sexual performance. He wasn't horrible, but he was also not remarkable. I hate to confess it, but I felt as if he was simply there, going through the motions, and his tool was well ordinary. His performance corresponded to his size, average. For a long time, I pondered what it would be like to be with someone, who is bigger. David was attentive and caring, and he always ensured that I was satisfied, but there was something lacking that I couldn't put my finger on. I know it sounds trivial, but it was something that weighed on me. I adored David and was content with our life together, but I couldn't shake my curiosity about what else was out there. I attempted to dismiss these ideas in order to focus on the positive aspects of our relationship, but they stayed in the back of my mind, nagging at me. I tried to ignore these ideas and concentrate on the love and connection David and I enjoyed, but the more I tried to ignore them, the more they crept into my thoughts. I felt bad forever. Considering it, for wanting more when I had such a beautiful husband who loved me unconditionally, but the thoughts remained, nagging at me from within. I attempted to conceal them behind the guise of a happy marriage, but they refused to stay concealed. I knew I needed to confront issues, but I was worried about what it would entail for my marriage with David. I kept telling myself that it was only a phase that would pass with time, but I knew it was more than that. I craved something more, something different, and I wasn't sure how to reconcile that with the life I'd made with David. Aside from that, our life together was mainly smooth sailing, with the occasional bump in the road. We had disagreements and arguments like any marriage, but we were always able to work them out, or so I thought. I attempted to push the concept away from my head in order to divert myself. I even tried to add new elements to our sexual life to spice it up, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the nagging curiosity in the back of my mind. Looking back, I realized it was my fault. I was so consumed by my yearning for anything more that I failed to realize the harm I was causing. Around that time, a new coworker entered the picture. He was young, gorgeous, and pleasant, and it appeared that everyone in the office was attracted to him. They chose me to coach him, which I was fine with. I regarded it as an opportunity to focus on something else and distract myself from my own thoughts. At first everything appeared normal. He was eager to learn and seems genuinely interested in his work. But then I started noticing little things, like how he went out of his way to be extra polite to me. He would bring me lunch, coffee, and assist me with jobs even when I hadn't asked for it. He would volunteer to stay late and assist me with projects, even though he had no duty to do so. At first, I didn't think much about it. I assumed he was just trying to make a good impression and demonstrate his work ethic. But as time passed, his actions became increasingly clear. He would make excuses to be near me and touch me in subtle ways that made my skin thrill. He would compliment me, telling me how intelligent and lovely I was and how fortunate David was to have me. I tried to dismiss it as innocent banter, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I could sense tension rising between us, a deadly spark that could ignite at any moment. Even though I tried to reject it, I found myself drawn to him, to experience the thrill of the forbidden. I was aware I was playing with fire, that I was jeopardizing everything I had with David for a fleeting moment of thrill, but I was too curious, too distracted by my own ambitions, to recognize the danger I was in. His name was Jaden, and there was an evident appeal between us. I tried to avoid it and resist the temptation, but to be honest, I did a poor job at it. Something about him was seductive and intoxicating, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I knew I should have reported his behavior to HR, but I should have intervened before things got out of hand. But the fact was that I welcomed the attention. After years of feeling unhappy and unfulfilled, Jaden's praises and flirty gestures were like a breath of fresh air, confirming my worth and desirability. I told myself it was only a harmless fantasy, but I knew it was more than that. I was toying with fire. I was willing to give up everything I had with David for the chance to try something new and adventurous. Despite my best attempts, I found myself still flirting with Jaden. I knew it was terrible to risk everything I had with David for a fleeting moment of excitement. However, there was something about Jaden, something intoxicating and irresistible that attracted me to him as a moth to a flame. I tried to avoid him in situations in which we would be alone together. However, that was not really feasible. Jaden worked in the same department as me, and our jobs required us to collaborate frequently. To make problems worse, Jaden was incredibly charismatic, and his charm was impossible to resist. It was as if there was an unusual magnet attracting me to him, regardless of how hard I tried. I want to make it clear that I still love David with all of my heart and would not trade him for anything in the world. He was my rock, soulmate, and the love of my life, but there was this underlying curiosity, a desire to try something new and exciting. I knew I was being selfish and reckless, but I couldn't stop myself. I just wanted to try a one-night piece of this guy to see how he tasted and then bounce. I knew it was wrong, but the allure of the forbidden was too strong to resist, and then a rumor started going around at work. I'm not even sure how it started, but suddenly everyone was talking about it. The rumor was that David had a huge tool. Now let me give you some context. The place where I work is quite large, not like our nightmarish huge, but still big enough that there are lots of employees. Despite the size, we're a tight-knit family and tend to all like each other. It was during one of our girls' nights out that the rumor really took off. Several of the girls at work had slept with Jaden. I know it sounds crazy, especially considering he was flirting with me while still sleeping with other girls at the office, but that's beside the point. The girls who had slept with him began talking about him, and the topic of his endowment came up with them, claiming he had a really big tool and was really, really good in bed. They talked about it as if it were the most natural thing in the world, laughing and joking as if they were discussing the weather. The rumor spread like wildfire through the office, fueled by gossip and speculation. Now, mind you, while all this was happening, Jaden knew I was married. Funny, or should I say sadly enough, he also had a girlfriend. In fact, they lived together, and I only found this out from one of the other girls he had slept with. But either way, the rumors continued that Jaden had a big tool, and I started getting really curious, considering my husband's size and the fact that I've always wondered what it would be like to try something else. I know now that what I did was so wrong, but back then, I just really wanted a taste, and then I became intoxicated with it. So like every other office rumor, the rumor came and went, but I was still very, very curious about it. Things continued for a while, the flirting, the back and forth between myself and Jaden. We would flirt with each other, pretending that we weren't dancing around the attraction that simmered between us. It was like a game, a dangerous game that I knew I should stop playing, but I couldn't help myself. Despite my better judgment, I found myself drawn to Jaden, drawn to the excitement and thrill of the forbidden. I knew it was terrible to risk everything I had with David for a fleeting moment of pleasure, but in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the tantalizing promise of something new and exciting, something that I couldn't resist. I decided to be a little more friendly with Jaden, which I now realize was very, very wrong. And I honestly don't have any excuses for what I did. To be honest, looking back, I shouldn't have even been friendly with him in the first place while I was training him, but what's done is done. I extended an olive branch to him, starting to thank him for what he would bring me. If he brought me coffee, I'd thank him. If he brought me lunch, I would thank him, stuff like that. I started appreciating him, not just for the things he did for me, but for who he was. I started dressing up well to suit his taste because, honestly, I enjoyed the compliments, and that was when we started talking on the phone. We had each other's numbers and even each other's Discord, but we had never really talked much because I never replied to his messages, and I guess he really didn't want to bother me much. But now I started replying to his messages, and we started chatting more. We found out we had a lot in common, liked a lot of the same stuff. It was easy to talk to him, to laugh with him, to share little moments of our day. It was like we had known each other for years, even though we had only just met. We had so much in common, Jaden and I. He was just so charismatic and easy to talk to. I found myself getting lost in our conversations, forgetting for a moment that I was a whole, married woman. It was as if I was back in college again, back in high school again, when life was simpler and full of possibilities. I'll admit it now, I did cheat on my husband back then in college. He doesn't even know because, well, I never told him. I was a little more careful back then. We went to different colleges, and I made sure to cover my tracks. My husband came from a very well-off family. He went to this huge, prestigious university, while on the other hand, I had to stay back and save up for my education. Of course, my husband suggested paying for me, but I refused. I wanted to be independent, and deep down, I really didn't want to go to the same university as him. There's this thing about going into college with a relationship, it kind of constricts you. A lot of the activities that individuals generally do in college, you won't be able to do them, go to parties, have random hookups, and stuff like that, because you're trying to be loyal to someone. It was just hard. I cheated on him a lot of times, but he never found out, well, until this incident with Jaden. Anyways, it was as if I was back in college again, enjoying my college days, reliving the thrill of being young and free. At that point, my husband started noticing that I was becoming very distracted with my phone. I mean, how could he? I was on my phone, texting all day and night. The only exception was when I was in the office, where I could meet Jaden face to face. But the rest of the time, whether at home or elsewhere, I was on the phone with him, conversing about something. My husband observed this and attempted to speak with me about it, but I simply dismissed his concerns. I told him everything was okay and that I was just more distracted by my phone than usual. I felt bad for lying to him and betraying his trust, but I couldn't stop myself. I was addicted to the thrill of chatting to Jaden, in the exhilaration of our private discussions. However, after about a week of conversing, Jaden and I began hanging out outside of work. We would meet for coffee or lunch, always careful to keep our meetings secret. Meeting him was exciting, even though we knew what we were doing was wrong. The chemistry between us was apparent, and I found myself becoming increasingly pulled to him with each passing day. I knew I was playing with fire, sacrificing everything I had with my spouse for a brief moment of thrill, but in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the pleasure of the forbidden, the adrenaline rush of being with someone fresh and fascinating. Jaden and I would hang out for a bit. We couldn't go to his house because he lived with his girlfriend, so we only had short hangouts at first. And we couldn't go to my place because my husband was always there. However, we began to hang out more frequently, and before we knew it, we were hanging out for hours. We'd go to the movies and touch each other here and there, but we never went any further. It felt as if a force was pulling us to cross these barriers, and eventually, we did. On that fateful day, Jaden's girlfriend was gone for the weekend and invited me over to see a movie. I went joyfully, knowing that this was our opportunity to be together without interruptions. My husband was at home, so Jaden and I couldn't go to his place, but luckily his girlfriend was away for the weekend. That's where my 9 to 5 job came in useful, since I began convincing my husband that I was working extra hours just so I could spend time with Jaden. I'd go on dates with him, watch movies with him, and tell my husband I was working overtime and such. So, I went to Jaden's house to see the movie. It started out fine, we watched the film and absolutely enjoyed it. It was incredibly engaging and intense, and in the middle, we kissed. We began making out, unable to withstand the attraction that had grown between us for so long. Things moved swiftly between me and Jaden. Before I knew it, I had committed one of the most serious blunders of my life. I slept with Jaden. Of course, I was terrified, and I regretted it immediately. I realized what I'd done was wrong, but it was really nice. My spouse has always been mediocre, his performance was ordinary, but Jaden was extra large, and his performance was far superior. Not that my husband is horrible, but you understand what I mean. It felt as if my eyes had been opened to a universe of new possibilities. I realized I had made a huge mistake, yet I couldn't help but feel energized by the experience. It was as if I had been living in black and white, and now I was seeing the world in color. Jaden had ignited something in me that I had never felt before. But, of course, guilt quickly set in. I realized I had deceived my husband in the worst manner possible. I had broken his trust and shattered our marriage vows, and for what? A moment of delight. It was not worth it. It wouldn't be worth it. I instantly regretted it. I realized I needed to leave, so I picked up my belongings and left. I went home feeling so guilty. My spouse thought I was working overtime when, in fact, I had cheated on him. I felt quite guilty. I even suggested making dinner that night, even though my spouse usually handled the housework. He was shocked but was cool with it. That night, I paid extra attention to his needs. I believe my husband noticed and asked if something was wrong, but I told him it wasn't. I didn't even mention that I wasn't on my phone like usual, and I told him I wanted to take a vacation from phones. The next day, I went to work, and Jaden was there, just being himself, being polite, complimenting me, and attempting to strike up a discussion with me. He said it wasn't my fault, and perhaps I shouldn't have believed him, but I really needed someone else to take the responsibility. Jaden has a knack for making things appear normal, bright, and sunny. He had a way of making you forget your issues, even your worst ones. He was just extremely charismatic. It didn't even take me a week to fall for him again, and before I knew it, Jaden and I were having a full-on affair. I told my husband I was working overtime when, in reality, I was going to spend time with Jaden. It was especially difficult for us because Jaden remained with his girlfriend. They lived together, so we couldn't go to my house because my husband worked from home, and we couldn't go to Jaden since he lived with his girlfriend. She also had an online business, so she rarely left the house unless she needed to make deliveries alone or was hanging out with friends. Jaden and I didn't want to risk going over to his place because what if his girlfriend returned sooner than expected? I did not want to be embarrassed or caught with someone else's lover, so we kept away from Jaden's house. We used to hire motels, but there was always the danger that someone would spot us or enter the hotel. What if I went to a motel with Jaden, and my husband's brother or sister, a relative, spotted us? What do I say? I would have no excuses. We tried to avoid meeting up in private areas or going out of town for our rendezvous, but the worry of getting caught hung over us like a dark cloud. Nonetheless, the joy of being with Jaden and experiencing something new and thrilling was too much to pass up. I knew I was doing something wrong, but in those times with Jaden, none of that seemed to matter. All that mattered was the rush of adrenaline, the thrill of the forbidden, and being with someone who brought me back to life. So we began using my automobile. We would alternate between being intimate in Jaden's car and in my car. It was much easier that way since we could simply wait for everyone to leave the workplace and be the last to leave. We would then seek out a discreet location to have our affair. However, as the saying goes, when you stop focusing on something else and stop putting in the work, such as your relationship or marriage, you begin unconsciously separating yourself from your partner, and that's exactly what I was doing with my husband. I began instinctively distancing myself from him. We weren't as close as before. We weren't going on date nights as much as we used to because I'd come home from a night out with Jaden and tell my husband I was tired, so we'd cancel the date nights for that night. Of course, my husband was perplexed. He genuinely tried his hardest. He fought for our connection, but I regret it so deeply because it seemed like I was just watching my husband battle for our relationship while I was so far gone, so committed with Jaden that I neglected my spouse and my marriage. It's funny how you can be so unaware of what's right in front of you. My husband was there, doing his best to make our marriage work, while I was off with Jaden, living in a fantasy world. I had no idea how much I was hurting my husband until it was too late, and by then, the damage had been done. I wish I could go back and make changes, but I can't. All I can do now is try to make things easier for my husband when we eventually meet in court for divorce, to try to heal the harm I've caused. But I know it will not be simple. Trust, once destroyed, is difficult to repair, and I'm not sure if my spouse will ever be able to trust me again or even be friends with me. Things continued for a time. I maintained my affair with Jaden. In fact, it became a daily routine. I will not lie to you, I began to get sloppy at concealing my affair. I believed that if my husband did not notice anything, there was no need, and being extremely sneaky, I started getting lazy. I started becoming sloppy. I was withdrawing from my marriage, and everything was falling apart around me, and I hadn't noticed. Also, I began to unconsciously distance myself from my friends and family. I stopped hanging out with them, calling them, and checking in on them. My affair with Jaden consumed my entire world, and I had no idea how much I had neglected everything else in my life. However, as the saying goes, the truth will eventually surface. For me, it came out in the most unexpected manner. One day, my husband decided to clean my vehicle. He was always thoughtful and caring, taking small steps to make my life easier. I was very tired, simply too tired. I guess I appeared a little lazy that day. I had forgotten to discard the napkin and condom that Jaden and I had used. It was still inside the car. I felt too lazy to go to the car wash, so my husband just said, "You know what, let me just wash your car for you because it has been a while." So my husband gets the hose and stuff to go wash the car, and I'm just resting in bed for about 5 minutes until I hear him scream. I honestly thought he had seen a snake or something, so I ran out to meet him, only to find my husband holding the napkin in which I had placed the condom that Jaden and I had used. It was an extra large size because, as I previously stated, Jaden has a massive tool. That's how I messed up my marriage. My husband looked like he was about to cry when he discovered the condom. I was stunned. I tried to explain to him that it wasn't as it appeared, but my words came out all wrong. He just stood there, holding it, his eyes were filled with hurt and anger. I felt like the world's worst person. In a last-ditch attempt to fix things, I began to spin a story. I told him it couldn't have been me, but someone else. I even considered asking a coworker to lie for me. My female coworkers are big on the girl code, and because I'm close to a lot of them, if I called them in front of my husband, they'd lie for me right away. But I knew that wouldn't help anything. My husband deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt, but he did not believe me. He accused me of lying and violating his trust. He appeared to be hurt. I was so crushed that I couldn't take it. I tried to explain to him that it was an error, I still loved him, but he just walked away, leaving me standing there feeling even lower. My husband's words struck me like a ton of bricks. He stood there furious and told me to leave his house. He called me a betrayer and couldn't believe that while he was doing everything he could to save our marriage, I was having sex with someone else in the car he bought for me. I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. He'd been trying to figure out why we weren't as close as we used to be, and I'd been betraying him the entire time. The guilt and shame washed over me as I realized I had destroyed everything we owned. As he walked away, I knew there was nothing I could say to make it right. I had made a big mistake, and now I had to deal with the consequences. After my husband stormed out, I didn't even have the courage to call him back. I just sat there, feeling the weight of my shame pressed down on me. I knew this was all my fault, that I had messed up big time. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my phone rang. It was Jaden. I picked up, boiling with anger. I cursed him, screamed at him, and told him I never wanted to see his face again, not even at work. I could not bring myself to leave, despite everything I wanted to salvage my marriage. So, I waited for my husband to return. When he finally came back about 5 hours later, he was genuinely surprised to see me still there. He asked why I hadn't left as he had told me to. I attempted to apologize again, but he wouldn't listen. Eventually, he agreed to hear me out. I told him everything about my affair with Jaden, how it started and all the times I had shared with him. I admitted that I was curious and wanted to experience something different, but I regretted it deeply. My husband listened, but his decision was clear. He said he needed time to think and asked me to leave. I tried to plead with him, hoping he would forgive me, but he was firm. He told me he needed space and that there was no way he was leaving his house for me. I realized then that he was serious, that he might never forgive me. I packed up my things, feeling a deep sense of loss. He wouldn't even let me take the car he had bought for me. I called an Uber, knowing that this might be the end of our relationship. Despite everything, I still held on to a tiny modicum of hope that my husband might forgive me. We had been together all our lives, and I couldn't imagine life without him. He was my best friend, my companion, my all-in-one. We had known each other since childhood. So how could he just not forgive me? As a show of faith for my husband, I decided to quit my job. I packed up my stuff and called an Uber, heading to my parents' house. Thankfully, they were understanding. I didn't lie to them. I told them the truth about my affair. They were very angry because they loved my husband as if he were their own son. However, they were also my parents and couldn't simply dismiss me like that. They needed to let me in. Fortunately, my parents let me in, otherwise, I would have been homeless. As soon as I arrived, I contacted my boss and resigned immediately. He was startled that I had not provided any notice. I apologized and stated that it was an emergency situation. I enjoyed my job, but I needed to leave to avoid seeing Jaden if I wanted my husband to forgive me. I told my boss I'd get my belongings later. Fortunately, I didn't have anything very significant at the office. In fact, the majority of the stuff there was simply work I would have needed to turn in regardless. My husband wasted little time in destroying my finances. Within days, he emptied our joint account, leaving me with only around 20% of the funds. The majority of the money was his, but it seemed cruel. This was a terrible reality check. When the money was gone, I realized he'd never accept me back. Everybody attempted to help, my parents, even my siblings contacted him to speak on my behalf. However, cheating was a line that could not be crossed, even they were unable to forgive a cheater. Not losing my husband seems like the ultimate punishment for my infidelity. We hardly converse now, and when we do, it's strained. He hasn't blocked me, so I'm continuing to send him messages, hoping to keep the lines of communication open until the divorce is official. I assured him that I would make the divorce process go as smoothly as possible by signing every document without hesitation. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm doing everything I can to put things right. I've been actively looking for remote work because, frankly, I'm tired of 9-to-5 jobs. If I had always worked from home, I might not have met Jaden, and my marriage would still be intact. However, life does not provide for second chances, and you receive what you give. Of course, I couldn't simply let Jaden go free. I knew I needed to put things right, at least in some way. Jaden, the person who helped me destroy my marriage, couldn't get away with it. I found Jaden's girlfriend on Facebook, since Jaden was open about their relationship. I texted her about Jaden's adultery, including copies of our messages as proof. After that, I logged out of Facebook and blocked Jaden on all platforms, including phone calls, so if he tried to contact me, I wouldn't notice. It was a small gesture, but I considered it vital. I had to accept responsibility for my conduct and guarantee that Jaden faced penalties for his involvement in the affair. I wanted to share my story here since I know this community can be quite understanding. So, thanks for listening. My so-called husband intends to wreck my life over a minor mistake I made. I'm not sure why he believes it's right to do what he intends to do. Yes, I cheated on him, but I suppose it had to happen eventually. To say he is a mummy's boy is an understatement. I simply couldn't handle it anymore, and I had to succumb to the urge that kept coming up. He should be pleased that I waited so long to cheat on his pathetic self. That man deserved it, one day or another, and he shouldn't even bother to act shocked. You don't marry a lady just to try and change her. It is not and will never be your place to do that. I am my own person, and he was extremely aware of this when we married. We had no prior interaction in which I was told I was not good enough or that I needed to be someone else to please him and his irritating family. So why was everything suddenly hurled at me? My name is Anastasia, and I am a 24-year-old dancer. Yes, I am a dancer, and that is something I enjoy doing. I make money from it, plus I'm also a choreographer, so I am hired to teach people how to dance. However, it appears that my husband is using this against me and intends to fire me. I believe it would be more accurate to say that he has been exploiting this fact against me for quite some time. He claims that I am overly exposed to males. My spouse, Collins, is a 28-year-old banker. You can notice the difference, right? He is a banker, and I am a dancer. Of course, we have different occupations, which can make being a pair challenging, but we managed to make it work and got married. What makes me even more furious is that we met while I was working at a party to which he had been invited. He genuinely spotted me as I was working, and now he's attempting to claim that my employment is awful. We exchanged numbers on the first day we met, but we didn't contact each other for nearly 5 months. I didn't know his age range back then because we didn't talk much at the party. I thought he was my age because he looked similar to me in some ways. Fast forward to the day we finally made contact. Well, he contacted me first and invited me out on a date. I was left busy and decided to leave. I didn't expect us to bond so well, and 2 years later, we were married. I was 23 when we got married, and we've been married for just a year. I was only 23 years old when I got married. Of course, I'm still in my youth, and I'm not the most mature person. In fact, I never claimed to be mature. Was I ready for marriage before I got married? Well, I don't really know the answer to that question. I liked Collins a lot, and that's the only word I'm going to use. I don't know if love is the right word to use in this situation. I've never been in love and have never fallen for someone in my entire life. It sounds unbelievable, but that's the truth. I've been in relationships and dated a few people. I liked them a lot, and we spent a lot of time together, but it's never been to an extent where I feel like I'm madly in love with this person and cannot wait to spend my entire life with them. Maybe that's because I'm not an overly emotional person, or because I'm always focused on working and earning money. But with Collins, I decided to be married to him because I felt like he was the most stable man I had ever dated before. I just dated other dancers or artists because those were the kind of people I was mostly around. It was never because I preferred a certain profession. So when I met Collins, I just believed that he was the right man for me because he seemed like the serious type. I also liked the fact that he was a banker. I mean, dating a banker is far superior to dating a dancer or artist. Most artists are not ready to settle down. I felt like I was ready to get married, but I wasn't sure of it. But when I realized Collins was also ready to get married, I felt like it was for the best. So I said yes to his proposal, and then we tied the knot. I've always wanted to be that girl with a stable life. I've never really liked traveling many times as a result of work, but it's what I love doing, and I can't stop now, even though I need to keep in shape, everything because of my job. I told Collins I was ready to start a family with him 2 years into our marriage. That was the plan, and he didn't have any problem with it. Did I meet his annoying family before we got married? Of course, I met his whole family a total of 4 times before we tied the knot. They were well behaved throughout and never made me feel as if I was marrying into the wrong family. But 2 weeks after the wedding, it was war. Yes, war, and I am not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating at all, and I don't think anyone else can understand my struggle. Collins comes from a very big family. When I say big family, I mean that he has several siblings and cousins. His house is almost like an extended family because almost all his relatives, both married and single, live there. If you are wondering why that is the case, it is because his father was once a very rich man and he built a really exaggerated house. The house is actually quite big and has other houses in the property. According to what I was told, he got addicted to gambling and lost all the money within 2 years. Well, I don't know how true the story is, but this is what Collins told me. His father is late now. I heard he died in a car accident one night after drunk driving. So after his death, most family members decided it was a good idea to move into the house because they felt it was very big and could save all of them the cost of rent. Now, guys, I know you all are wondering how this has anything to do with the story, but trust me, it does. After the marriage, Collins asked me to follow him to his family house for their annual meeting, and I decided to follow him because, of course, I'm his wife, and I should support him in situations like that. But I regretted the decision immediately when I got to the family house because I realized that they were just a big hurdle filled with bullies and people that talked down on other people just to make themselves feel better. I didn't understand why everyone felt like it was right to comment on my body and tell me that I had to change. The fact that I was a dancer suddenly became a problem, and his mother made a really big fuss about it when I visited them for the yearly meeting with Collins. She kept rubbing it in my face and telling me that dance was not a legitimate profession and that I was just wasting my time and damaging my life since it was not a true profession, and exposed me to a lot of distasteful things. I had to ask her why my profession was suddenly a problem after the marriage and why she didn't tell me everything before the marriage. That's when I discovered that Collins did not tell them I was a dancer before the marriage. He actually told them that I was a nurse and that I was a graduate of some big school or something like that. I was so surprised and angry that I didn't even know what to do with myself. I couldn't believe that Collins would lie about my profession and paint me out to be someone I was not. It was even more ridiculous that he had to hide my true profession from his family before they thought I was fit to be his wife. Another stupid thing is the fact that Collins was ashamed of telling his family that I was a dancer. I pulled him aside and asked him why he had to lie to his family and make it seem like I was a nurse when I was just a dancer. I'm a dancer, and I'm proud of it. I've never been ashamed of what I do, and I don't think there's a reason for me to be ashamed of something that gives me money. I earned my satisfaction, and I didn't beg from anyone or ask anyone to give me money. I would rather be a dancer than be roaming on the streets. The fact that his family thought they were better than me for some reason was just funny. They are the ones squatting with each other and living in a house that they didn't even build. They are basically jobless with nothing serious to do and are squatting together to save rent, yet they feel like they could dictate what profession I was into. If I had been judged by a multi-career family with several people in different fields that were actually successful in what they did and made a good living out of it, I would have actually felt bad. But I was being judged by a family that couldn't even afford to stay on their own. What hurt me the most was the fact that Collins just sat there and let them speak ill of me. So, when I call him foolish, don't judge me for it. Every decision he makes has to be dictated by his mother. If I knew I was getting married to a mummy's boy, I would have run as far as my legs could carry me. He was so indecisive and quiet. I mean, how do you sit down in front of your family and let them say whatever they want about your wife? How do you not say anything to defend her or make her feel better? It was like he made them believe I was a nurse, so I wouldn't get quizzed by them and run away. Then, when he finally married me, he brought me to his house so they could charge me and make me get another job. I know some goody two-shoes women would try to tell me I should have just quit my job, but I'll say this ahead of time, I don't want any advice from those kinds of women because it just never makes sense. You met me as a dancer, then you're entitled to a foolish self who wants to change me after we tied the knot. If I quit working and stayed at home to be your perfect wife just to shut you up, in less than 2 years, you'd still be the same man telling me I was feeding off your money and bringing nothing to the table. How ironic is that? And why would I want to be in that kind of situation if I'd quit my job? Collins and his family would still try to talk down on me and make me feel like crap. So, I made sure I didn't make such mistakes or get myself in such a compromising situation. It was just not something I was willing to do. When we got home that day, after the annual family meeting, I was so angry that I didn't try to contain my anger or hide how I felt inside. I had to ask Collins why he thought it was right to sit silently at a gathering where my character was being butchered. No excuse, he had no excuse and couldn't come up with anything but the fact that he saw some truth in what they were saying. Yes, he says this to me. I'm not even sure why I married a banker. Maybe the artists I used to date were not ready to settle down, but at least they stood up for me in insulting situations. They never stood by and watched me have my character assassinated for something as insignificant as being a dancer. That day, we had a long conversation, and I made it obvious to Collins that I was not going to change or quit my work. I assured him that I would continue to be a dancer and that he could do nothing to change that. After that day, I felt like I had unleashed a beast in Collins. He became his family's puppet, and they attempted to annoy me jointly. He became enraged after visiting his family and asking me to accompany him because he simply wanted to hear them speak ill of me and make me feel horrible about myself. When I recognized what he was trying to do, I decided to stop following him to his family's house. I stopped accompanying him and told him he could go on his own. He tried to make me feel unsupportive, but I rubbed it in his face and said I didn't mind. I eventually found peace of mind once I stopped coming to his family's residence. I opted to spend more time at work rather than sitting at home doing nothing. I was assigned a large number of events and shows to work on, which was extremely rewarding for me. Since following my wedding, my supervisor decided to offer me fewer jobs because he believed I would need to spend more time with my husband. But I believe he realized I wasn't feeling the honeymoon bliss anymore and decided to put me back to work. More people had joined our dance team, and they were mostly men. Yes, you read that correctly. I was surprised to see so many boys on our dancing squad. The majority of them appeared more attractive than they should have, and I was expecting to work a lot. Yes, judge me for expressing that. I found a couple of males appealing. Well, that is the truth. I am married and not blind, so I don't think it's inappropriate for me to state what I perceive. They were really kind and often approached me to talk about the team because I worked longer than they did. I enjoyed interacting with them because I had a nagging spouse and an unemployed family waiting for me after work every day. I honestly began to regret getting married so early. I regretted it and still do because it is the actual truth. Collins observed this, so I stopped going to meet his family with him. He chose to bring his family to the house. Even just describing what happened makes me enraged. I returned from work one day to find his sister, mother, and 2 of his cousins in the house. Yes, you read it correctly, and it's true. I've never brought anyone from my family to the residence before, and he is aware of this. I never tried to do that to him. I couldn't believe he brought 4 people home without first speaking to me. Okay, I get that he owns the house, but it only makes sense that he tells me ahead of time, even if he isn't supposed to ask for permission. After a hard day at work, I returned home to a large bag of garbage. Those people must embody the epitome of shamelessness on the planet's surface. They couldn't even sit in the living room and watch TV without them discussing my own body and how slim I was. I despise his entire family. I absolutely despise them. I don't care what anyone says, it is what it is. Collins, on the other hand, simply sat there as if he couldn't see what was going on. How can you expect me not to cheat on that type of guy, a man who has no say over his own actions and solely does what his family asks of him? That's the type of man Collins is, and I wasn't ready to take any of it. So, I went to sleep in the room and waited for Collins so we could talk, but he never came inside the room. He spent all night entertaining his family, and I know this since I couldn't sleep due to the excessive noise they were all creating. I attempted to shake them off and fall asleep, but nothing worked. He'd rather spend the entire night speaking and joking with his relatives than come into the room to see his wife. I hadn't even started cheating on him by then, but do you see how silly he was? Who wants to stay married to a mother's boy? If you've witnessed the worst of it, just listen to this. Something exceedingly annoying occurred one day when his mother, sister, and siblings were still there at the house. I returned home from a tough day at work only to be greeted by his irritating cousins, mother, and sister. His mother informed me that she wanted to have a serious chat with me. Of course, I stupidly assumed it was acceptable to sit down with her and converse. Perhaps it was because of the stress at work, but I completely forgot they despised me. At the end of the day, she asked why I wasn't pregnant yet. I go ask the woman why she's not pregnant yet. She informed me that her kid was not getting any younger and should already be a father. So, I had to ask her why her son didn't marry earlier in life so that he could have a child and why she wanted to make me the baby maker. I mean, I am literally 24 years old. I'm not saying I'm too young to have children, but it doesn't make sense for me to rush into things just because my husband is 4 years older. Besides, Collins and I had previously agreed ahead of time that we would not have children until our 2-year anniversary. I asked Collins about what his mother said, and he said he wanted children too and couldn't wait so long. I told him I didn't want children yet and wasn't going to be pressured into having them. It was a never-ending back and forth, and I became tired of the difficulties in the marriage and made no effort to resolve any of them because I didn't believe they were my fault. If anything, I've always done my best to manage his family, but they're rude and obnoxious. Collins is a very different story, and I'm simply fed up. So, what have I done? I cheated. Why? Because I wanted to, and I felt as if I were married to a baby. I was bored of the marriage, but I had the courage to seek a divorce since I didn't want to be homeless yet. I wanted to continue working and earning enough money to get my own place. I had a lot of money saved up when I married Collins, but I spent irresponsibly because he's a banker and makes a good living. I wasn't paying rent or expenses as I had in the past, so I purchased a lot of expensive items. I only began saving after realizing that my marriage to Collins was doomed. So, one of the dance team's members is my affair partner, and we hit it off after months of friendship. We slept together 2 nights following my 1-year wedding anniversary and have remained together ever since. But I never expected Collins to find out. Apparently, one of his nosy sisters decided to follow me to my dancing school and caught me kissing my partner outside. My boss is aware of the relationship, but it is not his concern, so he stayed quiet. Collins's nosy sister, however, grabbed a picture and forwarded it to him. I returned home 2 days ago, and Collins decided to give me the scare of my life. The house was disorganized, and practically everything looked broken. He was so enraged that he cursed and screamed, using derogatory language. I assumed that would be all, but he kicked me out of the house yesterday and burned all of my footwear. He threw my belongings outside and shut me out. I'm currently staying at my affair partner's home, but Collins is still wanting my peace. I heard he intends to fire and disgrace me. I don't understand why he cares so much. He made the bed, and I simply slept on it. It's equally his fault and mine, but wanting to fire me is just too much. Update: I am now unemployed, and it is all due to Collins. He wasn't kidding when he swore to wreck my life. It's been 6 months, and I've seen hell literally. Even after he gave me divorce papers 2 weeks later, which I signed, he made sure I was dismissed. I never believed my boss would terminate me, and I was very confident. But I'm not sure what agreement Collins struck with him that prompted him to fire me. I trusted my supervisor so much because I had been working with him for so long, and I still can't believe he dismissed me. Collins also hired goons to intimidate my affair partner and spread rumors about me. He kicked me out of the house 2 months after my divorce from Collins was official. I was living on what little money I had saved and hoped to acquire spousal support, but I just found out that I won't be receiving any spousal support anytime soon. Apparently, our marriage lasted only a year, and I worked and earned enough to be self-sufficient and not rely heavily on him. My lawyer did his best, but we had to settle for very little. Collins now has 6 months until he can pay me the spousal support. I'm broken till then. Collins truly changed things up to damage my life. The mommy's boy chose to teach me a lesson, and now I am single, broke, and without a job. It absolutely aches. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.